Aloha. I'm Representative Cynthia Thielen. I represent the windward side of Oahu, and today I'm delighted to have Robert Harris with me talking with all of us. Robert, will you explain to the viewers who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely, and thank you for having me. My name is Robert Harris. I'm the Director of Sunrun for Public Policy. Sunrun is the largest residential solar provider in the United States, and it's a company that helped pioneer the idea of solar leasing, or trying to make it more affordable and give people the option or ability to have solar without necessarily having to deal with the upfront cost of buying it. It's a great company to work for. It really advocates for good, strong policies to ensure that people can have the right to solar, and it helped form a group called the Alliance for Solar Choice, and works with a number of competitors, people we compete with, but we work collaboratively to sort of advocate for policies that make sense for average people who want to have solar.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, today we're going to talk about something that's really important, that's going to affect everyone that's watching here. A Florida company called NextEra is intending to buy Hawaiian Electric. This means that a Florida company would own our utility and be making the decisions that are going to affect everyone that turns on the light switch. And Robert, maybe you could talk about some of this, and what are your thoughts about NextEra?
Yeah, no, I'd be delighted to. And without getting too wonky or too much on the policy issues, I think one thing we have to stress right off the bat, that Hawaii is on the forefront of energy policy. Mm-hmm. The entire United States is looking at Hawaii and saying that what happens there is going to be a really good signal of what's going to happen throughout the rest of the country. It's not often that we get to be first in something, so it's kind of fun, and it's an exciting area to be in right now. But nationally, there is this discussion, sort of what is the utility of the future? What does it look like as new technology is coming along and becoming cheaper and more competitive? So for example, here, we call it distributed generation, or a fancy way of essentially power that you can create at your home. Most frequently, it's going to be rooftop solar, and you can do it in a way that it's cheaper than what the utility can provide. And as this starts to happen more and more, the price of solar gets more and more less expensive. It creates a situation where what is the utility going to do in the future? And so are we going to be a very decentralized future? You're still trying to make sure everyone can get service, everyone can get power, that there's a reliable way of doing it. Or are we going to be more the old traditional style, which is a very vertically integrated utility that controls and owns everything?
Well, that's the concern I have about what I've read about NextEra and what I've done with the research on the internet. They seem to be, they own everything. And the consumer doesn't have solar and doesn't have maybe photovoltaic.
I think that's right. I mean, I think in Florida, it's predominantly powered by old nuclear power plants or LNG, very little renewable energy, and almost no rooftop solar. They have
But in Florida, the Sunshine State?
Yeah, exactly.
And no rooftop solar?
It's a bit ironic, isn't it? I think they have something like 960 or so approximately customers out of 4.8 million residents.
How do they stop them from putting in solar, or is there just not an industry down there that really will help put that in?
There's definitely been attempts and efforts to advance solar in Florida. One of the issues is that they've made third-party ownership illegal, which is one mechanism to help finance or help make sure people can afford to do solar. They've also done something on property taxes, which in Florida become a really big deal, that make it less financially viable for people to do solar. Maybe put another way, it's a very, very efficient company that's been very, very strong in making sure the policies don't help or support anybody doing rooftop solar. Let me give you some additional examples. Where Hawaii has a very aggressive and well thought out renewable portfolio standards, or goals for how much renewable energy we're going to have over time. Florida doesn't have anything comparable. Where we have energy efficiency goals, where we say we're going to try to reduce the amount of energy we're going to use, and we have programs that encourage people to use things like CFLs and solar hot water heaters. Florida doesn't have it. In fact, they've drastically cut back on anything that they've had. So it's just a very different system, and you basically have two very different views of what the future of power should look like coming into contrast. And I think it's always trying to find the silver lining. I think it's going to be a great discussion, which choice is good for Hawaii going forward. My suspicion is, when you have a regulated utility, when you have a monopoly, the purpose of having the regulation is to serve the public interest. What does the customer want? Or, put it another way, you're supposed to imagine as if there is competition happening. So for the first time with rooftop solar, you have actual competition actually going on in real time, and you're seeing it, and it's creating benefits, right? In that, I think the utility in Hawaii now is a lot more concerned about rates in a way that they've never been concerned before. Before, you had no choice. You had to buy the power.
They didn't have to.
And now, it's becoming a very real-time worry for them that, if rooftop solar is cheaper than their power, then that's a direct threat. It's a direct a problem. And so they're having to adjust. And I think that's inherently healthy. Competition does benefit people, and hopefully it'll drive prices down for everybody. And that's something we should continue. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, that's going to win out, is that this is a beneficial future. And if NextEra comes in, I think they're going to have to wholly embrace that. And if they don't, my suspicion is not going to happen.
Well, my concern is that they will fight against it once they would be able to buy Hawaiian Electric. And once NextEra stepped in and said, okay, guys, we now are the monopoly, and you're going to have to deal with this. Right now, I know a number of people are very unhappy with Hawaiian Electric because it has put over 2,000 people in the queue waiting to be able to hook up their photovoltaic systems. That's a lot of people that are either have already paid for the photovoltaic, or they're in the process of being under a contract to put it in, and they're in that limbo where they're not able to put it in.
Yeah.
Hawaiian Electric has come out with various excuses, one of which is it won't be safe. Then it comes out and says, well, it'll be safe, and okay, we're going to go ahead and do it. But it's a very difficult situation for a lot of consumers. Others that are thinking about doing it are then discouraged from even stepping ahead and doing that.
Yeah, no, it's a very real concern, and I think, I guess two answers, right? The first is addressing the concern about NextEra coming in. Mm-hmm. A group of parties, a number of different, ranging from the Sierra Club to the Alliance for Solar Choice and like Hawaii Solar Energy Association, and a number of others actually moved to the PC and asked them to finish some of this long-term planning that's been going on, and said, look, we need to figure out what type of power we're going to use in the future, where are we going to get it, how are we going to get it, essentially trying to figure out what the new business model is going to be for the utility. Let's do that first and then decide the merger. The PUC rejected that, but in rejecting it, they acknowledged that these issues have to be addressed, and they basically committed to trying to address them concurrently or before the merger is decided. So the hope is that there is going to be a plan that's laid out that says this is what we're going to do going forward in Hawaii, and that if NextEra agrees to the merger, they're going to also have to sign on to this is what the plan is. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, and we need to do that. I mean, we need to set Hawaii's destiny before a Florida corporation comes in and takes over.
Yeah,
and
no, I
basically that's what their plan is, a takeover, a purchase. I know Hawaiian Electric is trying to call it a merger. Hawaiian Electric won't exist. The name will, maybe, and it will be Florida making these decisions for what's going ahead for Hawaii. And at the same time, homeowners are finally beginning, I mean, they've in the last maybe 5-10 years have realized they can use the sun and produce their own power.
Yeah.
And it's going to make more sense for them than paying the high utility rates. The utility, of course, is saying, wait a minute, look at our bottom line. These people aren't paying those large utility bills each month. They're using the sun to power their homes. We don't like this, we utility, we don't like it, so we will slow up letting those people hook up. So there's been quite a struggle, and then all of a sudden, this surprise announcement in December, this company, NextEra from Florida, is coming in to buy Hawaiian Electric. So everything's in a bit of a flux. Then we have something else that I just absolutely love. I love the scientists that are coming forward and making wonderful inventions and producing things and lower the price, and that's the batteries, where a homeowner ultimately will be able to have a photovoltaic system, batteries not even the size of this table that we're sitting at,
Yeah.
and they'll be able to have a totally standalone system. At this point, it's a little bit pricey, so it's not taking place, but as much other than a few places where they're doing it. But that's our future. And that leaves the utility on the side unless, and then I could bring this up, in Florida, this utility, this monopoly, NextEra, has made it illegal to do some of these things, that you can't be a standalone with your photovoltaic.
Yeah, that's true. Disconnecting from the grid is problematic in Florida. I do think the bigger picture, and I'd love to talk about some of the future things, like batteries and what the future is going to look like. I think the bigger issue is, for over 100 years now, having what's called an investor-owned utility has worked for society at large. And the idea is you have a large corporation that is usually publicly traded that can acquire capital cheaply and then use that to build things that we need, like big power plants, or pay for the grid itself. And that's matched with the public interest in a way that's been beneficial. But now we're entering a future where we may not need those big power plants, we may not need a lot of investment in the grid, and that the interest of the corporation, which is to generate more revenue for shareholders, is now starting to become distinct from the interest of the public, which is they want these services. They want an evolving, changing future. It might be batteries. It might be a lot smarter and better, more efficient. So, when we have these conversations, they can be very academic. Like, what's the future of the utility look like? But it's very real in Hawaii because we're going to be deciding it in the next 2 years. And so it might be possible that the future is potentially even going to something like what Kauai has done, which is a publicly owned model where the only interest of the utility is what the public wants. And, again, I'm not trying to say that this is the golden elixir that solves everything. It's not. But I think it's something that has to be on the table, and we really have to start talking about it in a more serious way than we have been to date.
And there's a measure going through to have that looked at and say, what is the best for Hawaii? What's the best model? Because it's very difficult when you have a utility that's or has shareholders. The utility owes a primary duty to the shareholders to make a profit. But then you also have ratepayers, the people that want to turn on their lights and not have to pay as much for that power. And so then the utility can't serve two masters, really.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's why we have a regulated utility. That's why the regulators are supposed to try to imagine what it would be like if there was actual competition, and then sort of encourage decisions that go down that road. Well, we now actually do have competition, and that's a good thing. And people want these services. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Polls on this have shown like a 95% support of more solar. That's almost unanimous. It's essentially, yeah. So we know this is what people want. So it's now up to the regulators to make sure that this happens, or policymakers like yourself to say, like, this is the direction we want to go in. I've heard the governor make the reference to, like, this is a King Kalakaua situation. And I think the reference he's trying to make is when we first created our electrical grid back under King Kalakaua, he had to make a decision of who would own it, how would it be owned, what it would look like. We are fundamentally at a very similar situation. It's a crossroads, and it's a fascinating time to be involved in it. And I do hope it's a time where the people really speak up and say, this is what we want. because I think we could really chart a really great course that is, again, a model for the rest of the country to follow.
Well, I think we were on the road with that great course, but then this whole thing has changed when we have the Florida corporation saying, we're coming in, we're going to buy your utility, and we're going to run the show.
Yeah.
So it's right, I mean, we were really on the road to moving ahead to becoming certainly the greenest state in the nation, and tapping our wave energy resources with the buoy going in off Marine Corps Base Hawaii that's providing power into the system. And then NextEra, who says in Florida, we're not going to let anyone go off the grid. They all have to stay on and be our customers.
Yeah.
And they, with that mentality, which is an anti-solar mentality, they're coming into town, and the Public Utilities Commission is going to need to deal with that issue. Is this in the best interest of Hawaii to allow that sale to go through?
Again, it's a major decision. I don't think we've had this type of decision in decades, really, that would have so much of an impact on our economy, our way of life, and we have to make sure we make the right decision.
How many interveners are there in that proceeding to determine whether or not NextEra should be able to buy?
I believe it's
Hawaiian
28. It's a large number, and the Department of Defense recently moved to intervene as well.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that.
It's
the Navy, actually,
Yeah.
it's the United States Navy has, because they have a very big interest in that. They're very involved in the wave energy aspect, and so they finance the buoys offshore of Marine Corps Base Hawaii. So I certainly hope the Public Utilities Commission is going to approve their being one of the parties to be in that proceeding. They'd have a lot to offer, a lot of expertise.
Clearly, the military have been huge leaders on renewable energy and really trying to be more self-sufficient. And there are a number of great parties that are sitting at the table, and I think that's healthy. I think that's great, and I really am proud and congratulate the PUC for making that decision to let more people involved, make it a transparent and objective kind of process. And I do think it's also important, right, as we go through the merger process, that different concerns and values and different things get addressed and brought up and hopefully resolved. And again, we may not resolve them all, and then if so, then that may be a decision that this isn't in the interest of the people. But I think, again, it's an opportunity to have a conversation. One of the things that you brought up earlier was the impact of batteries or storage and what that's going to do. My hope is, I don't think it benefits us to have people going completely off the grid. I don't know if that's in our long-term future. I think it would be far preferable to keep people connected to the grid. But if they put storage, that can really be advantageous. And how do we encourage them to reduce the amount of power that they need from the grid? And so, some simple policies we can do, like a time of use policy, which is basically saying the cost of making electricity at different times of the day cost more or less. So, if it costs a lot of money, which it does, to produce power, from sort of the 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock window, 9 p.m., then charge people more for it and let them know that power costs more. So if you have a choice of when you run your dishwasher, when you wash your clothes, when you do these different things, that you're going to not do it during this period of time. But you also tell solar customers that if you put batteries and you're able to take away your load here, that's also helpful, and it helps bring down the prices for everybody.
So we partner rather than become sort of adversaries.
Yeah, well, and I think what it is really is it's sending the right signals, right? So if you're using power at noon, it's a lot cheaper. There's a lot of solar power on there. It's cheap power. You're paying still the same rate, so you're sort of subsidizing somebody who's using power at 7 p.m. And so we're just not showing people what the real costs are. And so if you want to encourage good behavior, you give them these signals. And again, it doesn't have to be a lot of signal, but you raise the price by 5 cents and you lower the price by 5 cents over here. And it will help a lot of these solar customers, hopefully, who are installing batteries to then help out.
But the thing that concerns me, NextEra isn't encouraging that type of behavior or that type of technology in Florida.
Yeah.
So do we want this out-of-state giant corporation. I mean, Hawaiian Electric is like, I don't know, just like a 20th of the size, if even that. Do we want this giant corporation with a much different corporate plan to come in and take over the utility?
I think, how do you judge someone, right? It's always difficult to figure out how to judge. Do you judge them purely on what they're saying, or do you judge them on their past actions?
I think you've got to look at the past action, because of course they're going to be talking nice.
Yeah, well, and I
they
think
do in the committee hearings.
I think the problem here is that there are problems with both sides, right? The past actions in Florida have not been good.
No.
And the comments they're making is they're being very vague. They're not really describing what their plans are for Hawaii, and I think the lack of plan, the lack of candor, frankly, about what the plans are is also troubling. At some point, they are going to have to say with specificity, this is what we're going to do.
Well, one of the things that I see them doing when I go onto their website, one of their plans is the $1 billion undersea cable from Maui to Oahu.
Yeah.
And I've felt that all along that $1 billion, which ratepayers pay. I mean, it's not going to be free money. Ratepayers will be charged that amount spread out over some time, but they will have to pay it. I don't think we need that. And that's where I go back. I know the wave energy, I know that we have talked about that in the past, but U.S. Department of Energy has examined the Hawaiian Islands and the wave climate, and they've said that each island could get 100% of the power they need from wave energy, with the exception of Oahu, and we can get 80% of all our power needs from that. Well, you don't need that much, but it just shows you that the vast resource that's there. So I don't see a $1 billion cable being necessary. We've got the rail. That's a huge amount of money that's being spent. We don't need a $1 billion cable on top of that. I mean, there's just sort of a limit what people can handle in these public kinds of projects, and I say let's look at the wave energy to help us move ahead. Have some of the people that are really producing power take a look at that, and let's go ahead with that, along with the solar, of course, which is just an incredible resource for us now that the batteries are coming in. I saw the Cube, the battery called the Cube, which is a great name for it, at NREL, which is the National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden, Colorado. They have a wonderful building now where they're doing this examination of the different technology, the batteries primarily, and they have like a catwalk where you can walk around and observe what's going on down in the science labs as you see it. So that's going to come, and that's the high-tech guys, women and men, that are developing these systems, and it's going to move ahead. But we have this conglomerate ready to pounce on Hawaii, and it's a very serious, concerning situation.
It's, again, I think you really stress the importance of good planning, right? Of really trying to lay out what is the plan for Hawaii. The problem in the past we've had with investor-owned utilities is we don't do a lot of planning, and basically they're looking to justify big projects. They want to build big stuff. And so the model for an investor-owned utility is to borrow money, hopefully cheaply, build something big, and then rate base that over time. So a $1 billion power plant, great, we'll build it. This is how they make money over time. What we're seeing in the future is that we're not going to see more demand. We're not going to need to build a lot of new power plants. It's likely going to be more and more decentralized or different forms of energy. And so the model may be more of just maintaining the grid and making sure power is moving back and forth. And so we want to be cautious in the next 5 years about what we're spending money on, and probably in some ways erring on the side of not investing in big things, because we're probably going to need less and less power over time. And we don't want to agree, for example, if we do a complete conversion of all our existing power plants to LNG, we're kind of liquid natural gas. We're agreeing to pay that high cost, and then we're stuck and locked into it over time.
I spoke against that, the LNG aspect on the floor the other day, because what it ends up doing is really trashing a lot of other areas to bring in that dirty product for Hawaii. And to me, that's reprehensible. But that's a subject for a whole nother, a whole nother program, a whole nother day.
And I'm not trying to get there. I think it's simply trying to say is that we have to have a pretty concrete 5, 10, 15, 20-year plan,
Right.
where we've kind of laid out what we think the different scenarios are, and leave some flexibility and recognize that technology is evolving. You mentioned the batteries.
And that's where NextEra has not done this at all, other than I know about their desire to put in the cable, the billion-dollar cable. But what they've come to town saying, we're going to buy your utility. Well, show us what your plan is, and with real concrete steps as to what you're doing, and how do our consumers, our customers, our homeowners, our renters, how did they get to be able to have a less expensive power, clean power, but to be part of that.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. And I think the recognition is we have to have that plan, and there has to be buying that plan, and we have to be thinking of other alternatives too. And that may be again a publicly owned entity.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating time, and we have almost run out of time. I'm so glad that the Solar Alliance is going to be part of the PUC proceeding. And I'm so appreciative of your years and your commitment on green energy and a green society in Hawaii.
Well, thank you, Representative. And we've really appreciated your leadership and support, at the House. And I think it's really stresses the importance of leadership and clear thinking at all levels of government, and that's been valuable.
Well, thanks to the audience for watching, and we want to move ahead with our green energy and making Hawaii the greenest state in the nation. Aloha to all of you. Thank you, and we'll be back with more of these. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.